Good evening, everyone. I'm Richard Wolff, and what I want to talk to you about tonight is something that should alarm every single person who cares about international law, about sovereignty, and about what empire actually looks like in practice. Just yesterday, President Trump posted on his Truth Social platform a directive that tells you everything you need to know about how the United States conducts itself on the world stage. He wrote, and I quote his exact words, "To all airlines, pilots, drug dealers, and human traffickers, please consider the airspace above and surrounding Venezuela to be closed in its entirety." Now, let's stop right there for a moment. Think about what this means. The President of the United States has just declared that the sovereign airspace of another nation is closed. Not by that nation's government, not by international agreement, but by presidential decree from Washington. This is not subtle diplomacy. This is not even thinly veiled imperialism. This is naked empire, announced to the world as casually as you might announce you're closing your own garage. Here's the hook that should grab every American's attention. When do we vote to give any president the power to close another country's airspace? When did we, the people, authorize our government to simply declare that the skies above a sovereign nation thousands of miles away are now under American jurisdiction? The answer, of course, is never, and yet here we are. Let me provide some context. This announcement came after the Federal Aviation Administration warned airlines last week about what they called heightened military activity in Venezuelan airspace. Within days, 6 major airlines suspended their flights to Venezuela. The Venezuelan government, quite rightly, condemned this as state terrorism and suspended those airlines' operating rights in retaliation. Now Trump has escalated further, addressing not just airlines and pilots, but in his own words, drug dealers and human traffickers, telling them all that Venezuela's airspace is closed. The Venezuelan Foreign Ministry responded by calling this a colonialist threat and an unjustified aggression against the Venezuelan people. Now, let's analyze this through a Marxian lens, because that's what I do. What we're witnessing here is the logical extension of capitalist imperialism in the 21st century. For over 100 years, American foreign policy in Latin America has been guided by one overriding principle: maintain access to resources, markets, and cheap labor, regardless of what the people in those countries actually want. We've overthrown democratically elected governments. We've supported brutal dictatorships. We've imposed devastating economic sanctions. And when all else fails, we threaten military force. Venezuela sits on the largest proven oil reserves in the world. Let me repeat that. The largest proven oil reserves in the world. Do you think for one moment that this confrontation is really about drug trafficking or human trafficking? Those are the justifications, the rhetorical cover, but the substance, the real economic and geopolitical logic, is about control. It's about a government in Caracas that has refused to subordinate its economic policy to Washington's preferences. It's about a country that has attempted, however imperfectly, to use its natural resources for its own people rather than for foreign corporations and investors. Here's another hook for you. Trump has openly acknowledged that he authorized CIA operations inside Venezuela. He's offered a $50 million bounty for President Maduro's capture. The United States has designated Venezuela's government officials as terrorists. American military forces are massing in the region, and now the airspace declaration. If you connect these dots, what picture emerges? It's the picture of a country preparing for regime change, possibly through military intervention. Now, I want to be clear about something. I'm not here to tell you that the Venezuelan government is perfect, or that Nicolás Maduro is some kind of saint. That's not my point. My point is about international law, about sovereignty. about the principle that one country does not get to simply decree what happens inside another country's borders or above its territory. The United Nations Charter, which the United States helped write and signed, is explicitly clear on this. The use of force, the threat of force, and interference in the internal affairs of sovereign nations are prohibited. What Trump announced yesterday violates every one of those principles. From a Marxian perspective, what we're seeing is the desperation of a declining empire. The United States no longer dominates the global economy the way it did 50 or 70 years ago. China's economy is now comparable in size and in purchasing power terms actually larger than America's. The BRICS nations are creating alternative financial systems that bypass the dollar. Countries across the global south are asserting their independence and refusing to automatically align with Washington. And so what does a declining empire do? It lashes out. It becomes more aggressive, more reckless, more willing to violate international norms because it feels its control slipping away. Think about the language Trump used in his post. He's addressing drug dealers and human traffickers directly, as if he's speaking to them personally, as if they're checking his Truth Social feed for guidance. It's absurd on its face, but it serves a purpose. It frames Venezuela as a criminal state, a narco state, thereby justifying any action the United States might take. It's the same playbook we've seen before: demonize, delegitimize, and then intervene. But here's what the mainstream media won't tell you. The economic war against Venezuela has been going on for years through sanctions. These sanctions have devastated the Venezuelan economy, making it nearly impossible for the country to import food, medicine, and other essentials. Tens of thousands of Venezuelans have died as a result of these sanctions, according to independent studies. And then, having created this humanitarian crisis through economic warfare, the United States points to Venezuela and says, "Look how badly they're doing under socialism." It's cynical. It's cruel, and it's effective propaganda. Now you might ask, what does this have to do with American workers? What does this have to do with ordinary people in the United States? Everything. Every dollar spent on military operations in Latin America, every dollar spent on CIA operations, every dollar spent on this machinery of empire is a dollar not spent on health care, on education, on infrastructure, on addressing homelessness and poverty right here at home. The working class of America has far more in common with the working class of Venezuela than either has with the billionaires and corporate executives who benefit from these imperial adventures. Moreover, the precedent being set here is extraordinarily dangerous. If the United States can simply declare another country's airspace closed, what's to stop other powerful nations from doing the same? What happens to international law, to the system of rules and norms that, however imperfectly, has helped maintain some degree of order in international relations? We're moving toward a world where might makes right, where the powerful do as they please and the weak suffer what they must. That's not just a threat to Venezuela, it's a threat to the entire framework of international cooperation and peace. Let me bring this to a close with a final observation. The showdown over Venezuela's airspace is not an isolated incident. It's part of a broader pattern of American foreign policy that prioritizes corporate profits and geopolitical control over human rights, over democracy, over the principle of national self-determination. Whether it's Venezuela, whether it's Cuba, whether it's Iran, whether it's any country that refuses to submit to American economic and political domination, the response is always the same: sanctions, threats, and ultimately the possibility of military force, As citizens, as workers, as human beings who value peace and justice, we have a responsibility to speak out against this. We have a responsibility to demand that our government respect international law, respect the sovereignty of other nations, and stop using our military and our economic power to bully and coerce countries around the world. The people of Venezuela have the right to determine their own future, to control their own resources, to organize their own economy as they see fit. That's what sovereignty means. That's what self-determination means. The United States does not have the right, legal or moral, to close Venezuela's airspace. It does not have the right to overthrow Venezuela's government. It does not have the right to impose regime change through economic warfare or military intervention. And we, as Americans, should not be silent while our government violates these fundamental principles in our name. Thank you for your attention to this critical matter. I hope you'll think deeply about what's happening, about what it means for international relations, about what it means for the future of American foreign policy, and most importantly, about what it means for the possibility of a more just and peaceful world. The decisions being made in Washington today will have consequences for years, perhaps decades, to come. We need to make sure our voices are heard before it's too late. Thank you.